Call the meeting of the City of Selma Planning Commission to order, January 27th, 6 p.m. And in the Selma City Council Chamber, 1710 Tucker Street, Selma, California. Our teleconference phone number is 301-715-8592. Webinar ID 883-1804-9306. When on the phone, if you wish to address the commission during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 to raise your hand, and we will select you from the meeting queue. Press star 6 to unmute and mute yourself. Our flag salute will be led by Commissioner Franco.
Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Roll call.
Commissioner Corey,
Here.
Commissioner Franco,
Here.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Stanridge.
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Kessler is unavailable tonight, and Chair Salas.
Here. Potential conflicts of interest. Any commissioner who has a potential conflict of interest may now identify the item and recuse themselves from discussing and voting on the matter. Oral communications. Notice to the public. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission regarding any item over which the commission has jurisdiction. No action or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issues raised will be referred to the chairperson for review. Members of the public shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Does anyone have any oral communication at this time? Please state your name for the record and your address.
My name is Gary Ford, 1325 Floral, Selma. First off, I think it's misleading for me just to get this today, that this meeting is January. I just received this a few hours ago in the mail. It doesn't give me a lot of time to rally my neighbors around.
Okay, you are referring to an
Amberwood.
item that is on the agenda. So this,
It says Amberwood.
yes, this
Amendment.
oral communication is for anything that's not currently on the agenda. So that item will be coming up and you'll be given the opportunity to speak at that time.
Well, I mean, I came in 3 months ago and they said this was a done deal with the environment, so I don't understand.
Okay, does anyone have any oral communication on anything that's not currently on the agenda? Okay, first item is our consent calendar. All items listed under consent calendar are considered routine. The complete consent calendar will be enacted by one motion by roll call vote. For purposes of discussion, any commission member may have an item removed from the consent calendar and made part of the regular agenda. The commission can then approve the remainder of the consent calendar. The one item on consent calendar is the consideration and necessary action on the minutes of the December 9th, 2024 meeting. Do we have any discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Franco,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Corey,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanridge,
Yes.
Chair Salas.
Yes.
Motion approved.
The next item is a public hearing. During the public hearing, I will first ask for staff's comments and reports on the item being discussed. After staff's presentation, I will then open the hearing to public testimony. I will then close the public hearing, at which time no member of the public shall address the commission unless specifically asked by a member of the commission through the chair. The Planning Commission will then discuss the matter among themselves and take action on the item being considered. The item is the development agreement and EIR addendum for the Amberwood specific plan and tract 6244. And the item is to recommend approval and certification to the City Council of a development agreement and environmental impact report addendum respectively for the Amberwood specific plan and Track 6244. The development agreement includes consideration related to building permits, fees, infrastructure, construction, financing of municipal services, and future entitlements to facilitate the ongoing development of the Amberwood specific plan. An EIR addendum has been prepared in compliance with provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, to address inconsistencies in some mitigation measures related to the project. The EIR addendum complies with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, as outlined in CEQA Guidelines Section 15164, 15162, and 15163. Staff report.
Evening, Commission. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
First meeting of the year. It's good to see everybody in 2025. Before you tonight is a proposal. The project would be a development agreement along with certification of an EIR addendum as a recommendation to the City Council, where that item would be presented to the City Council. As you know, the tentative subdivision map and annexation for the first phase of the Amberwood project was originally approved in 2021. Since then, there's been a couple of other items that have been approved by the city since then, mainly your zoning code update, which added provisions for a development agreement coming before the Planning Commission before it goes to the City Council, which is why we're here tonight. In addition, a development agreement can be proposed at any time by a developer. At the time that the tentative map was considered by both the Planning Commission and the City Council, a development agreement was not part of that application. So with that, kind of giving an overview of what a development agreement is, it is exactly that. It's an agreement between the city and the developer to provide for clarification of the development project, maybe phasing. It provides details of how the infrastructure will be installed, maybe how credit is distributed back to the city or the developer for those specific improvements, such as a park, storm drain basin, or some other facility that becomes dedicated as part of the project. It helps ensure that the project goes, as planned. It provides some stability and some certainty for the developer in terms of identifying maybe fees that will be paid. I think under some provisions of vesting tentative map law, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, some fees are frozen and you can't add new fees anyway. The development agreement simply restates something that they're already allowed to do to some extent, as well as dictating how long those fees are in effect for, which is typically the term of the agreement. Staff has included provisions to potentially reopen fees as part of this agreement if certain provisions are met, development doesn't occur in a certain fashion or as timely as maybe staff would like. Some of the community enhancements that are identified as part of the development agreement include a dual basin park, which took some negotiation with the developer in terms of design and location of that facility along Floral Avenue. In addition, it talks about public street maintenance, which was one of the primary reasons for doing an EIR addendum, because when the project was originally analyzed, it discussed private streets being maintained by a homeowners association. Since then, the project has evolved and it could be private streets, but it gave no provision for public streets. And so the EIR addendum, one of the major items reviewed as part of that is if local streets are dedicated as public streets, what would that look like? And we've talked about this as part of development projects, that public streets would generally become part of a community facilities district and paid for by the development for maintenance and ongoing repair, right? And so the development agreement identifies a lot of those type of provisions and provides specific detail that both the city as well as the developer can rely upon to ensure that the development's done in a comprehensive manner, taking into account specific points to ensure that the city understands and the developer understands kind of the rules of engagement for the project. Otherwise, they would be subject to zoning code updates, general plan updates, fee updates, development standard updates, which from a developer point of view, uncertainty makes the project considerably more difficult to finance and complete. And so from our standpoint, like we said, this development agreement solidifies the city's commitment to the project as well as the developer's commitment to the city that of how the project will be done. It is not proposing any density changes. It is not proposing any policy changes to the specific plan. It is not proposing anything of the like. What it is proposing is strictly identifying details of how the project will be developed, timing, reimbursements, credits, how those are divvied up, how those are calculated, and how the project would go forward. Not to say beyond the first phase for future phases as well. So we feel that the development agreement includes a lot of good provisions for us, ensuring that the park is done before the subdivision's done. I've seen subdivisions where they're completed and it's a dirt lot. And so you have people staring at a dirt lot for another 6 to 8 months after the project's done. If a developer leaves town, that could be a real problem for the neighborhood to find someone to complete that improvement. At least with this first phase, we have ensured as part of the development agreement that before they can pull a certificate of occupancy for the 100th unit, that park needs to be done. Again, other facilities like the dual use basin, we've ensured that it has permanent park space as part of it. It has park space that would be available through a large part of the year as play fields, unless you have a significant rainfall, and then it would be used for flood control, right? Part of that negotiation also, the city worked with the developer and the property owner to align that with the linear park so that it's along the linear park. Previously, it was away from the linear park, and in figures it had been shown away from the linear park. This creates a trail network that connects parks and further connects parks as part of the development of the project. And so, like I said, it's a give and take. We feel from the city standpoint that this helps to ensure that the project's built in a sound, constructive, and timely manner while ensuring public infrastructure is financed at an appropriate level to ensure that the project basically supports itself, as well as the timing of amenities and other things. So with that, staff's available for questions. I'd just like to add that the EIR addendum is a item that is required by CEQA. When you make some changes like this, you have to disclose if there's any new or additional impacts as part of the project. The changing from private to local streets item, along with the development agreement, do not create any new impacts that were not previously analyzed. So I guess one other item with regard to public notice, this hearing was mailed out well in advance of the 10-day requirement. In addition, it was published in the paper well in advance of the 10-day requirement. The notice that may have been received may have been for the city council meeting for February 3rd. And so that may be the notice. And so property owners would have received 2 notices. But for this hearing specifically, we can absolutely guarantee that it was well in excess of the Brown Act requirements of 10 days.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. At this time, I will open the public hearing to anyone who would like to come forward and give an opinion. You can come up to the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Name is Gary Ford, 1325 Floral. My issue always never to stop this plan. I knew we were never going to stop this plan. My issue has always been the roads. We're not paying attention to the streets enough on this. You're looking at, I don't know how many, maybe 600 more cars that are going to be driven down Floral. Floral is a bottleneck now. I can't even get out of my driveway at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, you have fire department going down this road. You have ambulance. You have funeral route. You have 3 schools in the area. How are you going to address movement of all the, Floral, and people argue with me, Floral is the only through street we have in Selma. It's the only street you can come in from other areas and go to the freeway. None of the other streets you can go to the freeway. So you need to make another exit route from this development. You have to go to Delray Street. You have to open up Dockery and let it go through to Orange or something, because you're never going to move this much traffic on that, just on Floral. And as far as the environmental thing, I came in 3 months ago, they said everything was a done deal. And I've talked about this impact study for a long time. I asked them when they did the groundbreaking over here, do you have an impact report on this road? And they said, yes, it's a good road. And I said, that's not what I'm talking about. The impact study is the amount of traffic that's going to be coming down this road. If any of you would ever go over here at 8 o'clock in the morning and see that the traffic is backed up all the way from Orange to Dockery, that people are going around them and running the stop sign, it's a mess. I know I heard you plan on putting a signal light at the corner of Dockery and Floral. I don't know if that's still on the agenda. But it's the same situation over here on McCall and Dinuba. That signal's been planned for years. The widening of Dinuba has been planned for 20 years. Where is that? So let's fix the roads in this town. Let's open them up so people can move traffic, so we maybe can get more business in this town that we need. I'm done.
Thank you.
Question for staff. May I answer or can someone answer Mr. Ford's concerns? Because we do have solution for the roads and Floral is not going to be the only road to access this development. As far as widening Dinuba Avenue, as development continue along Dinuba Avenue, it will be widened. The light on Floral and Dockery will go through as development starts, or I'm not sure at what point, so maybe staff can chime in on that.
So
Right.
I think Mr. Ford does, and I've spoken to, that's not even English. I've spoken to Mr. Ford previously, and I'd like to make it clear, there was the EIR for this project was certified in 2015. An EIR addendum is basically a supplemental document that is attached to that originally certified document. So really what this is it's additional information that supplements all the environmental review that with regard to his concerns about roads, that's usually the concern we get on most projects. I think every project we've had, that's been the biggest issue is circulation and traffic. Specifically, and I wrote down each thing he talked about, so I'll go through each one. Floral Avenue does have mitigation measures. One of them is a traffic signal at Floral and Dockery. And as part of the EIR, it was evaluated appropriately, and that is an appropriate mitigation measure. So in terms of phasing, traffic studies will be done to determine when that light goes in. But it is a requirement of the project. Some of his other items, Del Rey needs to go through. That will happen as the project is built out. Currently, Amber and the Del Rey alignment are shown on the specific plan for the project. With regard to Dockery going through to Orange, if Planning Commission recalls, I think there was some negotiation with the homeowners on Dockery, and it was eventually approved as an amendment to the originally approved tentative map that Dockery would be cul-de-sac at the entry to this project as to not inversely impact residents on Dockery. And so
Correct.
that was a specific amendment and accommodation made for by the developer to the existing and adjacent residents to mitigate perceived traffic impacts.
Correct.
Some of the other items, the McCall, as the McCall widening or Dinuba widening, as Commissioner Corey stated, as development occurs, that would be built out at the appropriate general plan circulation element standard, which is arterial 84-foot wide 4-lane road. I think there's some issues with Dinuba being built out in the county or inconsistent with that we would have to navigate. Maybe some parts won't have a firm bike lane, but the plan has always been for Dinuba, I think, to be a 4-lane roadway carrying people from Golden State all the way to Del Rey as part of this project, right? The McCall Dinuba intersection and street light improvement. That's a little bit different in terms of that's a city project, not a developer related project. And when you have certain funding associated with a project, it can significantly lengthen the timeline as you have to go through and get incremental authorization to spend money on an improvement. The McCall-Dinuba intersection signal improvement project is a federally funded project through Caltrans. And so every step that we go through, we have to get authorization to spend money, and they only have certain meetings at certain times a year to approve our authorizations. So it significantly lengthens our ability to obtain funding and move on to the next step. Right now, we're at right-of-way acquisition. We just got that approved by COG and Caltrans. And so we're moving through getting appraisals for the improvement of that project, and we'll be reaching out to property owners. But that's what happens when you deal with a federal agency and federal funding, right? So that being said, you know, I think Mr. Ford makes valid comments on traffic, and we take those seriously. As the development occurs, it's on both the north and south side of Floral, which will end up improving and widening Floral to a 4-lane roadway similar to Rose Avenue, but you would have other amenities that are required as part of the specific plan. Landscaping, wider sidewalks, bike lanes as part of this segment of Floral, right? And so we appreciate his comments. But as we've stated, you know, the mitigation measures are there for a reason, and we intend to enforce them. And I think the developer wants them too, because it makes them project better.
And I know one of Mr. Ford's concerns was the amount of traffic that the tract would generate, but they're not building all the houses all at once. They will be in phases. So that's what he's explaining, as each phase gets built out, if something else needs to be done, the road needs to be widened at that point. Yes, sir. Do we know how many homes will be in?
297.
297 will be in the first phase.
And
Mm,
I think the issue is really trips versus cars. I think the number of trips generated would be, you know, probably more than 600, but in terms of from a traffic capacity standpoint is really what we look at, and the level of service as well as the amount of trips or the distance that they travel is really what's been evaluated, right? And that's why certain intersections are required to have streetlights. Some are required to only have stop sign, or nothing's required at all. We clearly understand the concerns at specific intersections. I know Dockery and Floral has been an intersection that specifically with this project is a problem. School creates traffic issues. Residents use it as a shortcut along Dockery to get to the southern part of town. We know it's an issue. Part of the mitigation is putting in a traffic light, which is the highest form of mitigation you can put at an intersection. So that type of improvement is included as part of this project. And when I say the project, the specific plan is the project, right? There will be incremental development of the project, and at each phase, we will conduct a traffic impact study to determine the appropriate mitigation measures to be implemented that have already been identified as part of the project. So that being said, there may be incremental improvements, but eventually there will be the mitigation measures identified within the original certified EIR that will need to be constructed in accordance with those mitigations.
I have a question. You said the original EIR was compiled and approved in 2015. And then you mentioned the year 2021. Was that another addendum or? Okay. So
And
the 2021 was a kind of a fine tuning of the 2015 agreement?
the 2021 EIR addendum was specific to the lot sizes where they had access and things like that. And you know, Commissioner's correct, it was an EIR addendum that basically concluded there were no new impacts as part of that project because it was generally consistent with the 2015 EIR that already identified specific, if anything, it just further solidifies the findings from the 2015 certified EIR that these are significant impacts, that they still need to be mitigated, and nothing has changed since then.
So the one, the 2025 one, the one that we're discussing today, would it be safe to say that that also is another fine tuning of the previous two? And it states in the paperwork that there, again, is no other significant impacts.
There are no new significant impacts that were not previously identified in the prior environmental EIR, in the prior EIR.
Thank you.
Our public hearing is still open, so if anyone wants to approach the podium, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Arakil Arisian with the Arisian Group. My business address is 389 Clovis Avenue, Suite 200. I'm here on behalf of Lennar Homes of Fresno. I've worked on this project for a long time, and we're excited to see it enter this next phase. And we appreciate the city staff's time and effort working with our team to go through this development agreement, which really provides a roadmap on how to move the project forward. And so we appreciate everyone's time and attention on that and all the hard work that's gone into getting us to this point. We're here to answer any questions. We've got some members from Lennar Homes here as well. And if there are any specific questions that you guys have, we'd be happy to answer them. But we appreciate your time, and we appreciate staff's help in bringing this to you for this decision tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak?
Hi, I'm Alejandro Arreguin. I live on 2861 Dockery. So I live on the corner of Dockery and Floral. He mentioned about widening Floral. Is that something that would affect my property? And if so, how far into it would it affect it?
Which corner? Is it the south,
No, yeah,
south corner? Okay.
it's southwest.
Dockery or Floral? Did you have any other concerns?
Oh,
or-
that was it.
Okay. Anyone else?
My name is Annabelle Sanchez. I live at 2771 Dockery Avenue. I would like to know what communication has happened between the development and the district, seeing as I teach here in the district and traffic already in the mornings is very difficult. They're getting to Wilson Elementary School, which is right on the corner of where the construction will be. I would like to know what will happen to mitigate that. And I would like to learn more about what you spoke about as far as the adjustments on Dockery Avenue that you mentioned earlier, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to staff and to the commission. Do you have anything to add?
I mean, I can't speak for the developer and what communication the developer specifically had with the school district. I can tell you that the city communicates these type of projects to the school district to let them know that they're coming. I think the project, when it was being processed, included at least one school. I think it was an elementary school as part of the development. And that wouldn't happen without communication of where it needs to be, sizing, campus, acreage needed, those type of things without consultation with the school district. And so, in addition, like I said, staff meets with school district staff rather regularly to inform them of projects coming through so that they're aware. In terms of the traffic mitigation, the considerations were made as part of the traffic analysis at the time the project was analyzed. And traffic at that time likely was similar. I don't think that there's been any significant growth out in that area. This has been an ongoing issue out on Dockery and Floral for some time. So this is not a new problem. And again, as part of the project, any sort of intersection improvement, the highest level of improvement you can make is a traffic signal at that location. And so part of the mitigation too, if you think about it, may be an additional school going to a different location. They may have to direct students to another location, which would mitigate this intersection as well as school traffic. So, in a simple answer, yes, the city communicates with the school district. We can't necessarily speak for the developer speaking to the school district because that's a private matter between them and the school district, if there's any other negotiations that they're making between them as two parties, right? From our standpoint, the traffic, it was analyzed as part of the environmental impact report and mitigated accordingly.
So if they do put a signal in, or when they do put a signal in, how much property is taken?
That's a different question in terms of design. I think we try to mitigate taking people's property if we don't have to. And so the engineering design would look at minimizing cost first and foremost, as long as we can meet the traffic needs of the area. If we can fit 4 lanes without taking the gentleman's property, we will. Unfortunately, that doesn't always occur. As I stated at Dinuba and McCall, we're having to go through the appraisal process and identify right away to be acquired from the adjacent property owners. So as part of the design of that traffic signal, he would be notified as to how much. Right now, I can't give an amount. What I can tell you is it looks like the road or the shoulder is generally, I couldn't tell you without a survey or some sort of map to tell you how much currently exists in right of way and how much it needs to be expanded. Floral Avenue is supposed to be, again, 84 feet wide minimum for an arterial roadway. And so we would have to see where the center line is out in that location to determine if an additional 42-ish feet is currently acquired for city purposes out in that area. So that being said, we can be in contact with the property owner once we have preliminary plans. He would be notified as part of the acquisition process for that, in terms of just identifying what type of impacts his property may have at that time.
If I may add to answer your question, sir, the city, as Mr. Keene said, does its best not to ruin your property. That's not their goal. And if they do have to purchase certain amount of footage from, like frontage from your property, they will have to contact you, let you know what is the design and how many feet they need, how many square feet. They also would have to purchase it at fair market value. So they would need an appraisal for how much that land is worth, or some sort of evaluation, and they will be in communication with you. It doesn't just happen overnight, and they don't take your property without communicating to you directly.
And
That's part of the plan.
yeah, I mean, and for the record, the public hearing is closed, but I'll answer the question. Anytime you have ancillary facilities that are impacted by an improvement, if that open air ditch is owned by CID, we're gonna have to call CID and say, hey, can you review a set of plans to underground the canal? It is a very typical process that we go through. We actually have a cooperative agreement with them that on specific projects such as this, that the facilities will be undergrounded. That cost would be borne by the developer to put in that improvement, so. Again, public hearing is closed, but I'll answer the question. The city doesn't really own any open air ditches. If it's an irrigation ditch, it is either private to the property owner or it belongs to Consolidated Irrigation District more than likely.
Any comment from commission now? Or questions? Questions or comments from commission for staff?
I have a couple questions, of course. It states in here that a biological survey needs to be conducted for burrowing owls and so on, a few other things. Has that been completed yet?
So that's what we refer to as a pre-construction survey, and there's specific timing when you have to do those things. Typically, it's 30 days before you go out and excavate that you have to provide a copy of that study before we'll authorize or issue your grading permit. So that would be submitted as part of the site improvements with the project, and they would provide that to staff for review to determine if any, not only burrowing owl, but any specially listed species are located on the property.
Correct.
Prior to breaking ground, not.
How far away are we from breaking ground once this is passed?
I can't speak for the developer and their time frame. I can tell you, staff has reviewed multiple sets of improvement plans, and staff is at a point where at-risk grading, like the grades aren't going to really change. It's more notations and getting details out of the way of what the plans look like, and maybe negotiating with Cal Water or SKF. And so, from the standpoint of staff, we've reviewed a couple of sets of improvement plans, and at-risk grading would be able to be authorized. But again, we could authorize it and say you could go do it. It's a private developer issue of when they close on the property, when they have financing, and when they're ready to go do that type of activity. So I think for all intensive purposes, I think this is part of, maybe their proverbial checkbox, having this type of paperwork out of the way before they get final authorization from their financiers on shovel in the ground, or I would guess it'd be more like bulldozer.
How far are we from the completion of the Amberwood trunk line?
February-ish.
Okay.
It'll be done and then close out in March, like paperwork, punch list, and then
So
notice
we're
of
still on
completion.
track of first quarter.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Weather permitting.
Yes, it's been a dry year, so.
It says that a fire and police substation would need to be included in this development. When would that take place and who provides that?
If I recall, I think the specific plan calls for dedication of a community facility more in the central part of the project near the packing house, which is where all those community facilities, I think, would be dedicated. And so it would be land dedicated by the property owner and then developed either through impact fee credits or in concert with the developer, I think on a future development agreement basis, where maybe they build it and then we take ownership of it as part of the project and they receive credit or some sort of reimbursement through impact fees.
The school and the fire department, I think, for the whole Amberwood project,
Right.
but they don't get triggered as soon as Lennar breaks ground.
No,
So that's way
right.
down.
It would come later
Yeah.
down the road as more development. And on the interior streets, which are going to be made public and not private, so that they're not taken care of by the homeowners.
Correction, they could still be private streets. They could be private or public streets. The correction made in the EIR addendum allows for public or private
Okay.
if chosen by the developer, because they may want to do a gated subdivision,
Sure.
which in that case, it would be private streets, and then those would be maintained by a homeowners association of that specific project.
I see.
And so where we sit, it could be public or private. I think in any case, the roads would be maintained either through an assessment to the city through a community facilities district,
Mhm.
or maintained by a homeowners association through their dues to the homeowners association.
And when those streets are first put in, that is the developer's responsibility. Wait a minute. Okay, it says the city shall encourage the developer to actively farm land within the project site until phasing and housing market conditions determine that the agricultural land should be converted to urban use. So it's going to be sectioned off, and part of it will be housing, and then there's still going to be grapevines?
I believe whatever agricultural activity the property owner feels is financially viable, he will continue. I think the purpose of that discussion and mitigation is a product of the conversion of farmland, right? That
Right.
is considered a significant impact under CEQA, and so you want to essentially delay the conversion of farmland as long as possible. The EIR still concluded that it was a significant unavoidable impact as part of the development. However, to encourage them to continue farming as long as possible so that it's not immediately converted, I think was the intent of that section.
And there was originally planned an on-site wastewater treatment plant, and that apparently is no longer?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I think, again, this project has evolved over time and there were options provided. With the city making the investment in the Amberwood sewer trunk line, there would be no need for a wastewater treatment plant. In addition, these folks are within the sphere of influence of the SKF sanitation district, so they should have been going to SKF the whole time. And so any details like that, I think were more cleanup as part of this addendum to further clarify or refine, as Commissioner Garcia said, the eventual development as it is proposed.
And then I did read about the water impact when this is done, and the community will be restricted to very strict water usage.
Yes, I don't know if that was a question. I mean, I think as part of any project, when there's more stringent requirements, if everybody recalls, I think it was 2014, there was executive order from Governor Brown for more restrictive watering practices for almost every agency in the state. And so what year was this certified? This was certified in 2015. So it was right in the midst of those type of requirements. Now, if requirements have changed, obviously watering practices will change. However, one of the holdovers of that time is the model water efficiency landscape requirements of the state, which they have to show planting patterns, water usage, and it has to meet certain criteria dictated by the state. If you notice, certain people, certain developments have limitations on how much turf they can put in. Most strips have to be a certain width. Certain types of sprinklers must be used. You have to use drip irrigation. You have to use a lot of differing irrigation practices than maybe prior to 2014, specifically related to that drought, time frame. So a lot of those are baked into the building code and a lot of our typical code requirements now. And so, for the commissioner, I guess I answered, what wasn't a question, more or less, but I mean, if that suffices.
Yes, I appreciate that. The street light that you were talking about at Dockery there and Floral, when exactly is that supposed to happen? I mean, as soon as those 200 homes are built, or after phase 2, 3, and 4 are going on? And it didn't specifically say anything about that. It just says it'll be evaluated, but it seems like with all the complaints and everybody knows the problems that are on that street, there should be something maybe a little bit more definite or defined about when that should take place in the first phase, not the second, third, and fourth. And then also on Orange Avenue, that is a gigantic issue. My parents live right near there, and I go through there all the time in the mornings when there's huge lines. It's very dangerous. Kids are coming out of school. They're walking across the street. Cars are they're dodging cars, actually. And that seems way overdue for a traffic light. And I think that we had talked previously that the traffic light would be put in first at Dockery and Floral versus Orange and Floral. And I read in here that the developer is responsible for a portion of their responsibility?
To your point, the term is fair share.
Fair share, that's correct. Yes.
And the issue with fair share is the project doesn't have 100% of the impact or the traffic generated at that intersection. They're
Mhm.
responsible, and this is a requirement of the Impact Fee Act, that developers are required to pay their fair share contribution towards improvements. And so you do traffic studies to identify what percentage a project has towards a specific improvement. And in some cases, they may have enough to basically make it worth their while to just build it, right? As part of this project, each phase is required to do some sort of traffic analysis to determine if and when those improvements are required. I can tell you that it is likely that the first phase will not necessitate, based off of the traffic information provided, the traffic light at Floral and Dockery. I will verify that and get back to the commission, but I can pretty much guarantee that that is not the case. We have been in discussions about future phasing, and at that time, the traffic study would come to the planning commission and you guys could review it and make a similar claim. In addition, you guys could actually, discuss and negotiate with the developer if we would prefer that this go in earlier. Now, they may not be obligated to do it, but you can obviously ask. Everything we do is based off of technical research and professionals and experts in those fields as required by CEQA. Under the it's the Mitigation Fee Act, not the Impact Fee Act. Yeah, my bad. Again, we can only obligate a developer to pay their fair share towards an improvement. Again, mechanisms like development agreements and things like that can be used to identify credits available, reimbursements, and maybe negotiate when those improvements go in. But it's typically identified as part of those traffic impact studies.
Do we have any idea about the undergrounding of the canal, when that might, at what phase that might happen? Orange and Floral.
Yeah, orange.
It's a four-way stop right now.
You're talking about the full undergrounding of it, north of the intersection and south of the intersection? Okay, I meant to get to the rest of your question regarding traffic, and I will cover this as well. Staff is aware of the traffic concerns along Orange Avenue, which don't necessarily pertain to this project. It's a general concern, right? I think when you look at Orange Avenue, there's a part of Orange Avenue that actually expands to 2-lane, which invites higher speeds, which I find very odd. And so staff has identified some of the intersections in or around the school as part of our tactical urbanism grant project to put in temporary improvements to possibly study a road diet or some sort of restriping in that location to try and get speeds
Bike lanes.
down. Bike lanes, something to try and get motorist speeds down at that location. In addition, it is a long stretch without some stopping in some locations. That might be another option. As far as the canal is identified in the city's active transportation plan as a trail for which we have applied for funding through various agencies to basically extend that trail. If commission recalls, I think there's been discussion on the south side of town along the canal that we do have an active grant project where we're working on design and undergrounding the Consolidated Irrigation District canal that will connect to Thompson Park in the south part of town.
That's great.
But we have also applied for other grants, specifically, most recently, the south side of Floral and Orange to Fresno COG, which has not officially been awarded yet. And so we are actively pursuing funding opportunities to implement our plans. To that effect, developers may receive credit, and I know the developers are listening, for putting in such improvements as part of their project if they are directly adjacent or creating an impact to it, because it is in our active transportation plan and it is identified in our impact fee program as projects that are creditable or refundable if installed. So staff is firmly aware, I think, of infrastructure deficiencies in not just this part of town, but throughout the city generally, and we will leverage the resources available to us, work with developers to try and get those items that have been identified in our various plans, active transportation plan, the general plan in terms of building out roadways, the Parks Master Plan. Those type of plans provide guidance to staff to help work with developers, gather financial resources to implement those plans for residents. So staff is firmly aware of those deficiencies and we're working towards resolving them.
Excellent.
Anyone else?
All right, I will make a motion to recommend approval and certification to the council for a development agreement and EIR addendum for the Amberwood project.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Corey,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Franco,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanridge,
Yes.
and Chair Salas.
Yes.
And approved.
Approved. Do we have anything else that needs to be brought to commission?
Apart from Kamara being back, no, I don't. I don't know if we currently have any items scheduled for February. At a minimum, maybe what we'll do is we'll do. Ooh, correction. If council recalls, the housing element and various rezones and other items came before you guys late last year. Since then, we've been working with HCD and Fresno Cogs Identified Consultant Placeworks through the multi-jurisdictional housing process. And there's some zoning code text amendments that HCD recommended in addition to what we've already done. They're relatively minor, but it's a clarification that land identified in the priority housing inventory list that was in the prior cycle as well as the current cycle, if I recall, be developed at a minimum of 20 units an acre, as well, or with 20% of affordable as defined by the state. So I personally, I don't think it's needed, but HCD is asking us to do it. And if we wanted to get certified, we probably need to do it. So that being said, our R4 zone, which was the recommended zone for any of the properties listed on the inventory list, the minimum density is 20 units an acre, along with the general plan, which is 20 units an acre. And so we tried to convince them that this type of notation in the zoning matrix is not necessarily needed. They still want it. And so it is what it is at this point, that every property within the R4 zone, within the HDR designation of the general plan, for all intents and purposes, would be developed at 20 units an acre anyway. And so this notation is really just a further clarification of what developers are already required to do. And that is a huge difference.
And this is coming from the state. We have no control over this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, nothing else?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Now move to adjourn.
I deny.